What if the most powerful healing meals on Earth weren't designed by nutritionists or developed in research labs, but were perfected in Chinese household kitchens and street-side stalls over 3,000 years of unbroken culinary medicine? A tradition so systematic that the imperial court employed dedicated food physicians whose only job was composing meals as prescriptions. While most of the modern world treats food and medicine as separate categories, Chinese families have been eating meals built on compound interactions, thermal properties, and organ-specific targeting, with peer-reviewed clinical trials now validating the logic behind them. Number 4 contains a compound so effective at preventing dangerous blood clots that pharmaceutical companies modeled a synthetic drug after it, and a meta-analysis of 6 clinical trials found it reduced platelet aggregation more consistently than aspirin at standard doses. And number 1 is a meal so deeply embedded in Chinese medical tradition that it was prescribed by imperial physicians during epidemic outbreaks. And a controlled clinical study found it increased renal clearance of heavy metals by over 40% in just 14 days. We begin at number 10 with congee, the silky rice porridge that Chinese families have turned to for recovery for over 2,000 years. This is not just comfort food. In traditional Chinese medicine, congee was the first meal prescribed by herbalists during the Han Dynasty for anyone recovering from illness, childbirth, or exhaustion. The Bencao Gangmu, the famous 16th century pharmacopoeia compiled by Li Shizhen, listed dozens of medicinal congee recipes, each tailored to a specific ailment. Physicians in Guangdong and Fujian provinces would instruct families to simmer rice low and slow until it broke down into a thin, almost translucent gruel, believing it restored the body's vital qi without taxing digestion. Modern science has confirmed much of this traditional reasoning. When rice is cooked this extensively, it undergoes significant starch gelatinization, producing a food with an extremely low glycemic load compared to steamed or fried rice preparations. A clinical study published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that congee-style preparations increase the bioavailability of zinc and iron by up to 23% compared to intact grain meals, largely because the prolonged cooking breaks down phytic acid, an anti-nutrient that blocks mineral absorption. The high water content also supports rehydration, and researchers at Zhejiang University demonstrated that congee consumption improved gastric motility in post-surgical patients by roughly 18% over a 7-day recovery window. The amino acid profile of well-cooked rice porridge is gentle enough to be absorbed even when the gut lining is compromised, which is exactly why it works so well during illness. If you want to prepare it the traditional way, use a 1:8 ratio of rice to water, bring it to a boil, then drop the heat to the lowest setting and let it simmer for about 90 minutes, stirring occasionally until it reaches that smooth, flowing consistency. From a meal that restores the weak, we move to number 9, a dish built for strength. Stir-fried bitter melon with eggs. Bitter melon, known as kugua in Mandarin, is that knobbly jade-green gourd you see piled high in markets across Guangdong, Sichuan, and Yunnan. Its sharp, assertive bitterness is something most Western palates reject. But in southern China, families have deliberately eaten it through the hottest summer months for centuries. Traditional Chinese medicine practitioners classified it as a cooling food, prescribed to clear excess internal heat and restore balance during periods of high humidity. The science behind bitter melon is remarkably robust. The fruit contains a unique compound called polypeptide P, sometimes referred to as plant insulin, which mimics the action of human insulin at the cellular level. A randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology showed that participants consuming 2,000 milligrams of bitter melon extract daily for 90 days experienced a reduction in fasting blood glucose levels of nearly 18%. Another compound, charentin, has been shown in laboratory studies to stimulate beta cell regeneration in the pancreas, the very cells responsible for producing insulin. When you scramble bitter melon with eggs in a hot wok, the protein from the eggs tempers the bitterness, while the high-heat cooking preserves most of the active polypeptides. A separate meta-analysis covering 14 clinical studies concluded that regular bitter melon consumption significantly lowered hemoglobin A1C, a marker of long-term blood sugar control, by an average of 0.5 percentage point. The combination with eggs is not accidental either. The protein and fat slow digestion, giving the active compounds more time to interact with your gut lining. To prepare this at home, slice the bitter melon thin, salt it for 10 minutes to draw out some of the sharpness, then stir-fry it fast over high heat with beaten eggs, a splash of soy sauce, and a pinch of white pepper. That sharp green bitterness leads us naturally to number 8, a dish on the opposite end of the flavor spectrum: steamed whole fish with ginger and scallion. In Chinese culture, serving a whole fish is loaded with meaning. The word for fish, yu, is a homophone for abundance, and a whole steamed fish has been the centerpiece of Lunar New Year banquets and family reunion dinners across every province for centuries. Cantonese kitchens in particular elevated this preparation to an art form, insisting on the freshest possible catch. Steamed just until the flesh turns opaque and flakes at the touch of a chopstick. Then finished with a drizzle of hot oil over julienne, ginger, and scallion. Beyond tradition, this cooking method is a nutritional powerhouse. Steaming preserves the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid, far better than frying or grilling. A study in the journal Food Chemistry found that steaming retained up to 92% of the omega-3 content in fish, compared to just 67% with pan frying. Those omega-3s have been the subject of enormous clinical scrutiny. A large-scale meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American Heart Association, analyzing data from over 200,000 participants, found that consuming fish 2 or more times per week was associated with a 21% reduced risk of coronary heart disease mortality. The ginger in this dish is not decoration either. Its primary bioactive compound, gingerol, has demonstrated potent anti-inflammatory effects in clinical trials, with one study showing that 500 milligrams of ginger extract daily reduced C-reactive protein, a key inflammation marker, by 28% over 12 weeks. Look for sea bass, snapper, or grouper for this preparation, and keep the steaming time to about 8 minutes per pound so the flesh stays silky and does not dry out. Speaking of ingredients that fight inflammation from the inside, number 7 is a bowl you will find on nearly every street corner in mainland China during the cooler months: hot and sour soup. This Sichuan and Hunan staple is built from a base of rich stock thickened with egg ribbons, loaded with tofu, wood ear mushrooms, bamboo shoots, and seasoned with a heavy hand of white pepper and Qingqiang black vinegar. Sichuan households have eaten this soup for generations as a remedy for the common cold, believing the pepper opens the sinuses while the vinegar clears stagnation. The white pepper in this soup contains a bioactive alkaloid called piperine, and this compound has been studied extensively for its ability to enhance the bioavailability of other nutrients. Research published in Planta Medica found that piperine increased the absorption of curcumin by 2,000%. But its benefits go beyond nutrient transport. A clinical trial at Konkane University demonstrated that piperine supplementation at doses equivalent to a generous serving of pepper-heavy soup improved thermogenesis and increased metabolic rate by approximately 8% in healthy adults over a 4-week period. The wood ear mushrooms in the soup add another dimension entirely. They are rich in polysaccharides that have demonstrated anticoagulant properties in laboratory studies, with research in the International Journal of Biological Macromolecules showing these polysaccharides inhibited platelet aggregation by up to 36%. The Qingqiang vinegar contributes acetic acid, which a Japanese-Chinese collaborative study found slowed gastric emptying and reduced post-meal blood sugar spikes by nearly 20%. To make an authentic version at home, start with a bone broth base. Get your vinegar and white pepper ratio balanced. The soup should hit you with both sour and heat simultaneously, and finish with a drizzle of toasted sesame oil right before serving for that authentic fragrance. From a soup that warms your chest to a meal that feeds your blood, we arrive at number 6, red date and goji berry chicken soup. This is one of the most recognized tonic soups in all of Chinese cooking, a preparation that traditional Chinese medicine practitioners have prescribed to women after childbirth, to elderly patients recovering from surgery, and to anyone suffering from fatigue or pallor for well over 1,000 years. The recipe is deceptively simple, a whole chicken simmered low with dried red dates, known as jujubes, and a generous handful of goji berries in a clay pot until the broth turns a deep amber. In provinces like Hubei and Hunan, this is not a special occasion dish. Families prepare it weekly as routine nourishment. The goji berries are where the science gets particularly interesting. They contain a group of unique compounds called lithium barbarum polysaccharides, which have been the subject of over 200 published studies. A randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine found that participants who consumed standardized goji berry extract daily for 30 days reported a 20% improvement in energy levels, a 15% improvement in sleep quality, and measurably improved feelings of general well-being compared to the placebo group. The jujube dates bring a different set of compounds, primarily triterpenic acids and cyclic adenosine monophosphate, which clinical research has shown to have a calming effect on the central nervous system. A study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology demonstrated that jujube extract significantly increased sleep time in animal models, supporting the traditional use of red dates for insomnia. The chicken broth itself contributes readily absorbable amino acids, including glycine and proline, which support collagen synthesis and gut lining repair. Simmer this soup for at least 2 hours to fully extract the compounds from the dates and berries. That nourishing broth brings us halfway through the list to number 5, and this one might surprise you: mapo tofu. Yes, the fiery, trembling, crimson-oiled Sichuan classic that leaves your lips tingling is actually a deeply therapeutic meal. Mapo tofu originated in Chengdu during the Qing dynasty, credited to a pockmarked woman named Chen, who ran a small restaurant near the Wanfu Bridge. Her combination of silken tofu, ground pork, fermented chili bean paste called dubanjiang, and the all-important Sichuan peppercorn became one of the most famous dishes in the entire Chinese culinary canon. The therapeutic star here is the Sichuan peppercorn, which contains a compound called hydroxy-alpha-sanchul. This is the molecule responsible for that distinctive numbing, buzzing sensation on your tongue, and it turns out it does far more than create interesting mouthfeel. A study published in the European Journal of Pharmacology found that hydroxy-alpha-sanchul activated specific ion channels in sensory neurons that are directly involved in pain modulation, suggesting genuine analgesic properties. Researchers at Chengdu University of Traditional Chinese Medicine conducted a clinical investigation showing that Sichuan peppercorn extract reduced reported pain intensity in patients with mild osteoarthritis by approximately 22% over an 8-week period. The tofu in this dish provides high-quality plant protein along with isoflavones, particularly genistein, which a meta-analysis of 21 studies found was associated with a measurable reduction in LDL cholesterol of approximately 4%. The fermented doubanjiang paste is a source of beneficial bacteria and bioactive peptides created during the fermentation process, with studies showing fermented bean paste contain lactobacillus strains that support gut microbiome diversity. When preparing mapo tofu, the key is to bloom the Sichuan peppercorns in oil first, before adding the other ingredients, which releases the hydroxy-alpha-sanchul into the cooking fat and distributes it throughout the dish. The peppercorn's heat fades, and we arrive at number 4, a dish that works silently through your bloodstream. Blackwood ear mushroom and celery stir-fry is an everyday home-cooked dish across northern China. Humble in appearance, but quietly extraordinary in its effects. For centuries, traditional Chinese medicine practitioners in Beijing and Shaanxi classified blackwood ear mushroom, known as hei mu'er, as a blood-vitalizing food, recommending it to patients with sluggish circulation and those recovering from blood loss. The mushrooms are typically soaked until they unfurl into dark, ruffled, almost velvety sheets, then stir-fried fast with crisp celery stalks, garlic, and a touch of soy sauce. What makes this dish remarkable is a compound found in blackwood ear mushrooms called adenosine, which has potent antiplatelet and anticoagulant effects. A landmark study published in the journal Atherosclerosis demonstrated that regular consumption of blackwood ear mushroom extract reduced blood viscosity by approximately 12% and inhibited platelet aggregation comparably to low-dose aspirin therapy. That is not a small finding. A separate clinical trial published in Thrombosis Research showed that the polysaccharides from auricula, the scientific name for blackwood ear, reduced total cholesterol by 9% and LDL cholesterol by 13% over a 60-day supplementation period. Pharmaceutical companies actually investigated these compounds for potential drug development, though the mushroom itself remained freely available in every Chinese grocery store. The celery in this dish contributes a compound called 3N-butylphthalide, which clinical trials in China have shown reduces systolic blood pressure by an average of 7 millimeters of mercury. Together, these two ingredients create a synergistic effect on cardiovascular health that is genuinely impressive for such a simple, inexpensive meal. You can find dried blackwood ear mushrooms in any Asian market. Soak them in warm water for about 30 minutes before cooking. From a dish that protects your blood vessels, number 3 takes us to one that may protect your brain. Lion's mane mushroom soup. Lion's mane, called ho tu gu in Mandarin, is that shaggy, white, cascading mushroom that looks like it belongs in a fantasy novel rather than on your dinner plate. Buddhist monks in the mountainous temples of Zhejiang and Jiangxi provinces cultivated and consumed this mushroom for centuries, believing it enhanced clarity of mind and focus during long meditation sessions. In traditional Chinese medicine, it was categorized as a tonic for the 5 internal organs and prescribed by physicians in the Song dynasty for digestive weakness and what they described as mental depletion. The modern research on lion's mane is genuinely striking. The mushroom produces 2 unique classes of compounds called hericenones and erinacines, and these have been demonstrated in laboratory studies to cross the blood-brain barrier and stimulate the production of nerve growth factor, a protein essential for the growth, maintenance, and survival of neurons. A double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial conducted in Japan with elderly participants showing mild cognitive impairment found that those who consumed 3 grams of lion's mane powder daily for 16 weeks scored significantly higher on cognitive function scales compared to the placebo group. When supplementation stopped, their scores declined again, suggesting a direct and ongoing relationship between the mushroom and cognitive performance. A separate study in the journal Biomedical Research found that lion's mane extract reduced symptoms of anxiety and depression by approximately 30% in a cohort of menopausal women over a 4-week period, likely through its effect on nerve growth factor pathways. To make the traditional soup, simmer fresh or reconstituted dried lion's mane in a light chicken or pork bone broth with a few slices of ginger and a couple of red dates for about 45 minutes until the mushroom is tender and the broth has absorbed its subtle, faintly sweet flavor. If lion's mane feeds the mind, number 2 feeds something just as vital: your bones, your joints, and your deepest reserves of energy. This is slow-simmered bone broth, what the Chinese call lao huo tang, meaning old fire soup. In Cantonese culture, this is not a trend or a health fad. It is the backbone of daily nutrition, and it has been for as long as anyone can remember. Cantonese grandmothers start their broth in the morning using heavy pork bones, sometimes with chicken feet or knuckle joints, along with dried scallops, goji berries, and roots like astragalus or cotinopsis. The pot simmers for 4 to 6 hours on the lowest flame, and the result is a broth so rich and gelatinous it sets like jelly when cooled. The prolonged cooking extracts collagen from the bones and connective tissue, which the body breaks down into bioavailable amino acids including glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. A randomized controlled trial published in the journal Nutrients found that collagen peptide supplementation, which mirrors what you get from a well-made bone broth, at a dose of 5 grams daily significantly reduced joint pain in athletes by 24% over 24 weeks and improved joint function as measured by standardized assessment tools. Glycine, one of the most abundant amino acids in bone broth, has been shown in clinical research published in Frontiers in Neuroscience to improve subjective sleep quality when consumed at a dose of 3 grams before bed, with participants reporting less daytime fatigue and improved cognitive performance the following morning. The calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus that leach from the bones during cooking are present in ionic form, which some researchers argue makes them more readily absorbed than the forms found in standard supplements. The key to a proper Lao Huo Tang is patience. 4 hours minimum, 6 hours ideally. And using bones with plenty of joints and cartilage, because that is where the collagen concentrates. And now we arrive at number 1, the single most powerful healing meal in the Chinese culinary tradition. And it is not exotic or expensive. It is a bowl of steamed or lightly stir-fried dark leafy greens, and specifically Chinese broccoli, known as gai lan. This thick-stemmed, deep green vegetable with small white flowers has been cultivated across southern China for well over 1,000 years. In Cantonese cuisine, a plate of blanched gai lan dressed with oyster sauce is served at virtually every dinner, from the humblest home kitchen to the most expensive restaurant. It is so fundamental that skipping it would feel like leaving something essential off the table. Traditional Chinese medicine practitioners in Guangdong classified gai lan as a food that clears heat, resolves toxins, and supports liver and lung function, and they prescribed it with particular urgency during seasonal transitions. The reason gai lan earns the top spot is the sheer density and breadth of its protective compounds. It belongs to the Brassica family and is exceptionally rich in glucosinolates, sulfur-containing compounds that your body converts into sulforaphane during digestion. Sulforaphane has become one of the most intensely studied naturally occurring compounds in nutritional science. A clinical trial published in Cancer Prevention Research found that participants who consumed glucosinolate-rich brassica vegetables daily for 2 weeks showed a 61% increase in the urinary excretion of airborne pollutants, specifically benzene and acrolein, suggesting that sulforaphane dramatically enhances the body's detoxification pathways. A separate randomized controlled trial in the journal Diabetes Care demonstrated that broccoli sprout extract, rich in the same sulforaphane found abundantly in gai lan, reduced fasting blood glucose by 10% in type 2 diabetic patients who were obese, outperforming the placebo by a statistically significant margin. Beyond sulforaphane, gai lan is loaded with vitamin K, which clinical research has connected to improved bone mineral density, and vitamin C, a potent antioxidant that a Cochrane review of 29 randomized trials showed reduced the duration of colds by 8% in adults. The calcium in gai lan is also notable because, unlike spinach, which contains oxalates that block calcium absorption, the calcium in Chinese broccoli has a bioavailability rate of roughly 50%, nearly double that of milk according to research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The preparation could not be simpler. Blanch the stems in boiling water for about 2 minutes, drain, and dress with a spoonful of oyster sauce and a drizzle of sesame oil. That single plate, eaten daily, gives your body a detoxification boost, anti-inflammatory protection, bone support, immune reinforcement, and metabolic regulation all at once. 10 meals, thousands of years of wisdom, and now the clinical evidence to support everyone. Chinese culinary tradition was never just about flavor. It was healthcare disguised as dinner. So which one surprised you most? The bone broth that repairs joints while you sleep, or the humble gai lan that outperforms most supplements? Drop your answer in the comments. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one, and share this with someone who needs it.